We are back on MorningLine. Thanks for joining us. Chris Johnson with us, attorney with Takis and McGinnis Elder Law, experts extraordinaire. Really one of the best firms in the country for dealing with us. You know, I guess, fearless leader, Tim Takis, started this years ago and recognized elder law was going to become a growing segment of the legal profession. And boy, it sure has. He really knows his stuff, and everyone that works for him is so sharp. Appreciate you coming on, and don't blush when I compliment you. It's okay, it just comes with territory. We've got we just lost Tracy. I was about to take her phone call. I apologize. Tracy, call back if you just fell out, because she waited through the break. If Tracy calls back, we'll take her on that front. Listen, just wanted to ask a couple other things with regard to what you're seeing during the pandemic right now. Have there been questions from folks just about, I know to some degree, of estate planning or paying for things and where they go from here, whether or not someone is in the process of applying for Medicaid coverage if once they get to the point where they have no more money left in the bank to pay for their nursing home, things like that. Is that still status quo right now? Nothing really has changed? No new laws or anything along those lines?
No new laws along those lines. The big thing that's changed with regards to that type of planning is on the family side. I think they can't help but give a second look to moving a parent into a facility. And right now, I think the facilities are getting a very good handle on this. I think they're getting to that point. You know, we're talking about reopening the schools, and there's a debate about that. And there's a camp that's starting to say, listen, the schools might be the safest place for these kids. I know they're talking about that with the college football season, that these athletes might be safer in that bubble than they are at home. And I think as the facilities have really climbed the mountain to get on control of this, I think now we're starting to see that the facilities are probably as safe a place as anything else. But that was a big question for the last couple months is, do I feel comfortable moving mom or dad into an independent living facility, into an assisted living facility, into skilled nursing care with all of this going on and a whole lot of unknowns. And unknowns are the hardest things to plan for, because it is very easy to second guess yourself, because there's a lot of assumption of the risk in trying to figure out what's the right decision and what's the wrong decision. And now, as we have gained certainty, as we seem to hopefully be being on the backside of this, I think that certainty is starting to be there. I think the facilities have really upped their game in dealing with all of this. And so I think the planning for those scenarios, moving mom into a skilled nursing, moving dad into memory care, I think that's getting back to the status quo. I think people are starting to see them as the good options that they were before all of this stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where my folks are, and that's where they belong right now. Again, because they're off limits, as you said, when they get back in there, and a lot of these facilities that are doing it right really limit exposure and try to control the setting. You mentioned earlier the importance in terms of documents, the two biggies you say, wills and power of attorney. And power of attorney, there can be two separate ones. One, and I don't know if you can combine them. One, right, that's a power of attorney over the financial matters, and there's a second power of attorney that I could get for my folks, which is medical, correct? And can you combine them? And I would think medical is even more important maybe now for my folks' situation, because they are in a setting where they're locked in right now, and maybe I can do more dealings for them, outside with their doctors.
Yeah, so the standard is to have them as two separate documents. Okay. The healthcare power of attorney, that revolves around medical decision making. And so if I'm the healthcare power of attorney for one of my folks, if they're in the hospital and they can't adequately interact with the doctors and have a hand in their own medical care, that's where I come in, and it's my job. I make sure the doctors know that I'm the healthcare power of attorney. And then what the doctor, the conversation, the nurse practitioner, the conversation they would normally have with my parent, they would then have with me. And I get to ask for a second opinion. I get to talk about prognosis, diagnosis, review the medical records, ask their thoughts, and then start to say, hey, this is what we want to do. This is what we don't want to do. And a good healthcare power of attorney is going to provide all the legal authority that can be under the sun. And the reason for that is very key. And people talk about this all the time. They check these boxes, do not resuscitate or no feeding tube. And I always tell people is, don't take a hatchet where a scalpel will do. And what happens is you can't possibly think of all the permutations under the sun that you could be dealing with at that time. And what you want to do is, I talked about it at the beginning with the key players. You want them to have integrity. You want them to carry out your wishes. So I trust implicitly the people that I have appointed as my healthcare power of attorney to carry out my wishes. And then what I want to do is give them all the broad authority and discretion to take a look at the facts and circumstances on the ground and make the best call. I don't want them pigeonholed necessarily with a living will or a very tight roadmap, because I don't know what I'm dealing with, and I don't want to have them forced to make a decision or unable to make a decision that they didn't want to make. And so that is critical. Now, I'm not against living wills. I think there's certainly a segment of our society that they serve very well. If you're an unsupported elder, and that's a growing segment of our population, unfortunately, you're an elderly person, you don't have any close family, you might not have those people that you trust implicitly, backstopping a healthcare power of attorney with a living will, yeah, that's probably a very good and prudent decision. And that's where good estate planning is very much narrowly tailored to your personal circumstances and make sure we're addressing your individual needs. And that's where, if someone goes online and jumps on LegalZoom, they check some boxes and they think, or any of those legal software drafting things, what you're not getting is the analysis. Not having an attorney walk you through and say, these are the pros and cons of these decisions, because the other word for attorney is counselor, and that's what you're receiving when you sit down with them. You're getting counseling, because there aren't necessarily right or wrong decisions. There are just better and worse decisions, and people don't have an obligation to make the best decision in their lives. The best decision for me this morning would be to have eaten broccoli and oatmeal, and I've had a cup of coffee. So we're free in America to make our own decisions. Our job is to make sure that our clients are making informed decisions and that their plan is making them happy and satisfied in what they want to accomplish.
Okay, and if you would, just to be clear for folks, they hear will. Explain again the concept of living will, as you did say it would, maybe something you bump up with the power of attorney, but a living will meaning, it's just the frame. A living will, just by definition, the first time I ever heard that phrase, I was like, that makes no sense. A will's around when you're dead. It should be a dead will. But it's called a living will. What does that mean?
A living will memorializes your healthcare wishes and desires. It's what I like to refer to it as, it's the roadmap. It's the roadmap for the doctors that, do not resuscitate. I don't want to be an organ donor, no extraordinary measures, or all the extraordinary measures. You can put in it whatever you want. But the difference between that and a healthcare power of attorney is the healthcare power of attorney is appointing an individual and saying, this person is in charge of my healthcare decisions. The living will is saying, these are my wishes in the healthcare in the healthcare decision-making process. They can be used in conjunction with one another. The healthcare power of attorney can use the living will to backstop what they're trying to accomplish and say, listen, I have a living will. I'm doing exactly what they want to be doing. The problem is where the healthcare power of attorney might look at the circumstances on the ground and say, well, this didn't neatly fit into their living will, and I know under these circumstances they actually would want something different than what it appears in the living will. Because remember, these are all documents, they're written word, they're subject to interpretation. There's no way they cover every permutation. And so if you have someone that you trust implicitly, I certainly advocate that that's enough. Give them the healthcare power of attorney and let them be your advocate, and let them do that alone without an extraneous document kind of tripping them up.
All right, that makes sense. Keep it as simple as you can, correct? Keep it simple, and I guess too, you have to get to your loved ones early enough while they are still, because I guess when I got the legal power of attorney with my folks, they still had to sign off on it, saying, yes, I want to give this to my son. You need to get it done before maybe they get to the point, if they're battling dementia, where you can't really get them to sign something.
That's exactly right. And people, that's the other thing that people tend to do is they tend to wait and put these off. I've had some in their late 80s come in the office, and it was so funny. They looked at me and said, well, I just figured it was time we got this done. And I chuckled thinking, yeah, I think it was. I mean, and I'm glad they came in. It's never too late, with the old adage of when's the best time to plant a tree? And the answer is 20 years ago. When's the next best time to plant a tree? Well, it's today. And so we want to make sure it's never too late to do, other than capacity issues, but as long as you have capacity, it's never too late. But it's an easy thing to let slide to the right. And it's one of those things you heard me say at the beginning of the show. Everyone should have these documents. Everyone who's over 18, if it's just a simple will and simple powers of attorney for healthcare and durable general power of attorney, you need those. You need those because we don't know what's going to happen. Tomorrow is never promised, and it's better to have those things and not need them than need them and not have them.
Absolutely right. Listen, we'll take a break on that note. We've got one more segment, so stick around, Chris, when we come back. Maybe a few more phone calls, and I've got a few more questions for you as we talk with Chris Johnson from Takis and McGinnis right after this. Stay with us.